All right, well, it's 2:30, and there was 20 people that signed up on Meetup, and 40-some people that signed up on Facebook.
Oh.
And several people contacted me that said that they wanted to wait for the next one, which,
It was all about
Procrastination.
so we'll, there's people will probably come in, we'll just let them come in. We'll leave this door open. If anyone needs to use the restroom, you can go out this door, make a right, and then make a left, and it's at the end of the hall. And as people come in, we'll just let them settle in and join the conversation wherever we are. How many of you are familiar with DFW or IONS in general? You look fairly new.
Yeah.
So IONS is Institute of Noetic Sciences, and
What is noetic?
noetic means knowing, inner knowing, in the mind, of the mind, thought. So it's Greek. Gnostic and agnostic comes from Greek. So the Noetic Institute was developed in 1973 by former astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And it was all about, come on in, it was all about, it was all about bridging the gap between science and spirituality. So we meet the first Sunday of every month. And I might leave this open just for a little bit longer. It's a little more inviting. So, are you familiar with IONS?
Yes.
Okay. I was just explaining how IONS developed. In 1973, Edgar Mitchell wanted to bridge this communication, or bridge this conversation between science and spirituality. So we're a little chapter group that meets here the first Sunday of every month. And so if you like this kind of conversation and want to be a regular part of it, come back, or you can sign up. I have a way for you guys to sign up for my mailing list. And if you found me on Meetup, did you find me through? Okay, then I usually post wherever you found me on a regular basis. Okay, so let's talk about this conversation about the biology and psychology of procrastination motivation. Before I do that, let me introduce myself to you if you don't know who I am. My name is Daniel Danovi, and I'm a peak performance coach. I'm actually the area director for the DFW IONS. So I kind of run this group. I usually bring other speakers in every now and then. There's a gap, and I get called to say something. So I work, over the last 30 years, I worked with about 10,000 different people through public speaking and public workshops and one-on-one coaching. Invariably, some aspect of their performance is connected to not following through, not finding the motivation for the things that are most important to them in their life. That their dreams and they want to write a book, they want to start a business, they want a relationship, and they're not doing, or they want physical fitness, health. They're not doing the things they need to do in order to get the result that they think they want. I can come at this a lot of different angles, so I'd like to get some feedback from you so it can be relative to your life, and I'm not just talking hypotheticals. So as we move forward, can you give me some examples how procrastination shows up for you?
You just don't feel like it. You just don't feel like it. Don't want to do it, whatever it is. Whatever it is.
Getting places on time.
Showing up late for class and doors closed. Perfectionist.
Perfection.
Incomplete. So whatever the task is, it leaves incomplete. That's procrastinating finish.
So it's half done.
Or half done, incompletion, whatever, however you want to talk about it. Half-assed.
GPS signal lost.
Uh-oh.
So I don't quite follow that yet.
So I'm just saying that sometimes you can procrastinate completing your project, not just
Okay.
beginning it,
Oh.
not just ending it, just finishing it. You get halfway done and then you.
Oh, okay, got it, okay, I can, we
Yeah.
can talk about that. What else?
Research,
Pardon?
doing research instead of actually taking action.
Okay,
Or,
Analysis
or I'll like,
paralysis.
I'll wait, yeah, or like I like to wait till Monday, or wait till the 1st, or wait till the 15th.
In my case, analysis paralysis, analyze something where,
Yep.
yeah.
yeah, the research or planning area. This is, I'm guilty of this more often than not. I have this. I used to have this. This shows up every now and then. Procrastination in general is more, how many of it shows up for you as a character defect? Like, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I just get myself motivated to do this? Procrastination is actually a symptom or an indicator that something is missing in in your thought process. That the difference, if it was to show up, it would make a profound difference in your experience. It just means that something's missing, something's out of alignment.
That's interesting. It's also a sign of, a secondary sign of depression, but a major depression, but
Well,
that's a whole other, that's a whole
it's a
other thing.
result, and we'll talk about, and that's the biochemical state.
Right.
So most people, how motivation shows up is they create a goal or intention, and you think that just because you intended it and you think you want it, that all your systems should align behind it and get on board.
Right.
Yet, how often does that happen?
Depends.
Some, not much.
Now, part of this is in the beginning when enthusiasm is high, where we got all systems on board and we can see the result, we want to make this happen, and whether it be a new relationship or a new job or a new business or a new project, and then 3-4 days later we get the pull of the mundane aspects of life, and it seems like more of a struggle to get on board around this particular project. And it's all about how we're thinking about it. It's no longer in the forefront of our mind, the focus of our mind. So, everyone knows why we're here. And we're not.
I think sometimes I procrastinate because life gets in the way. Something I didn't plan on just is up front and center, and it moves everything else I had to the back burner because I wasn't planning on that.
Because you let it. We let that happen.
Interruptions. Now, one way to think about this is if you're driving from here to Little Rock and there's a stoplight, an interruption to your flow. Do you just pull over to the side and say, oh, I know I was heading to Little Rock, but here I am in Grenville, and you know,
Red light city.
I no longer feel motivated to go to Little Rock. What's the difference in that scenario than when in your project?
Focus and motivation.
And we're focusing on where we're going to end up, not on where we necessarily are at any given moment. And there's this, so how procrastination occurs is that when we think about the work involved, the driving, or the work involved, the planning, the research, that stuff, we tend to have some kind of stress response, a little icky feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't like to feel icky, so we put it off and we go to something that will give us, say, a little rush of dopamine or endorphins or serotonin. Those are the feel-good chemicals. In order to feel good in that moment and alleviate that little icky feeling. Now, you brought up depression in probably address it. I don't usually use this word. It's not in my vocabulary for myself. Although there was about 2.5 weeks in 1984 where I didn't want to get out of bed. I was working in Columbus, Ohio, and I was 24, and I was all by myself. I had an apartment with hardly no furniture. I was working a job where I sold church directories. I would go to different churches and find the pastor to secure an appointment with the board to come back and do a presentation about having us come in and take all the pictures of everyone in the church and then putting that in a directory. And my job was just to secure the appointment and get them to come on board, and then somebody else would handle the photography and everything. So I would drive around all day long. I had Columbus and the surrounding 50 miles. Columbus was a lot like Fort Worth in size and feeling. And I'd drive out in the country and I'd look for church steeples. And then I'd go and I'd find out where the parsonage was. And so I'd work all day to create appointments for the night. I had no social life. I felt completely lonely. And I just realized at that point in time, one day, I didn't want to get up out of bed. I just didn't like it. I thought I had the flu, but I didn't really have the flu. I had what they call that, the blue flu, where I just didn't want to get out of bed that day. And I didn't get out of bed the next day. I just got up, go to the bathroom, and, eat saltines and drink orange juice. That was basically all I ate for 2 weeks. And I had a little 13-inch color TV. That was my only source of entertainment. The only thing that got me out of that funk, I mean, the guy, my boss, was calling and leaving messages on the answering machine, just calling all kinds of names. I wasn't returning his phone call. I basically just disappeared. And I was just trying to, I had gone off on a path that was not ecologically sound for my life. It didn't really fit what I wanted to do with my life. Well, I just realized there was something that is tied to procrastination. I was told that there was a particular income level that was attainable. And I was working really hard and getting some success. And then I looked at, they had a brochure that came out, the top people in the company, all the top salespeople. And the top salespeople, they were cheered and edified, and I was looking at them and looking at their numbers, and there's no way they were making what I was told I could make. And they were hitting it out of the park. Suddenly it's like, I didn't see the value of caring for it. I just didn't get that it was worth it. And that's one of our considerations, is when we throw out a goal or throw out an intention out into the future, is it worth it? Is the effort worth it? And most of the time, in that moment, when we're sitting on the couch or sitting in our chair, and we're contemplating we're not contemplating where we're going to end up, we look at the work involved. And we think, oh, I just don't want to do that. It's just like, we have to overcome inertia. And we have to overcome this feeling state. So we're going to intertwine the biochemistry and the psychology, because how you use your brain affects your body. How you use your body affects your brain. They're synergistic. They call it the psychic soma loop. And there is no difference between, how many of you have heard the mind-body connection? As if they're two separate things. They are one and the same. Because your body is your mind is your body. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If I think about raising my hand, I don't have to think about which neurons to fire, which muscles to contract, which ones to relax. And I've been doing it enough to where there's a certain fluidity to it, and I don't even have to think about it. I just send the instructions.
They're just the same coin, just two sides to the same coin.
Yes, I like to refer to it as they're two separate aspects of a whole.
Right.
And the only way, the reason they're different is so we can talk about them. So we can kind of put fine points to our conversation. Because I can talk about this extension of my brain, of my hand, this is how I feel out in the world, but my hand is just, when I say hand, everyone has a reference to what a hand does, and its reference to it, and the way it brings in information. So part of all this is running through our unconscious or subconscious mind. Could you share with me your perception of the subconscious or unconscious for you? Is it a friend or is it a foe?
Can be a friend, okay.
Depends on what's going on.
How many of you have had circumstances where it feels like your subconscious is working against you? Just about everybody.
But then there's that gut feel too, which I think of as an expression of what's down inside, and it says this is true or this is right, and it may be counterintuitive, but it's that gut feel that so it works both ways.
Okay. I've been studying the phenomena of hypnosis since I was 13 years old. I became intrigued and enamored with it because I wanted to hypnotize girls. And over the years, I've hypnotized a few, and I've hypnotized enough men in general, and in very short order, I realized the capacity or the usefulness in changing our behavior and healing the body. And when I first started learning hypnosis, the subconscious was represented like a dark dungeon. And a lot of the self-hypnotic processes were like going down the stairway, deep, down and down and down and down in the recesses of your mind. And that's the way a lot of people think about their subconscious. And my perception of the subconscious has completely changed. In fact, I usually say the other than conscious aspects of mind. Consider as a human being, in your body, you have 50 to 100 trillion cells. Now, if you don't have a reference for what 1 trillion is, consider $1 bills stacked one on top of each other, 14 stories high. Then 14 stories high, covering an entire football field. That's 1 trillion. And you have 100 trillion cells. If you're a little smaller, it might be closer to 50 trillion. But not only those are your cells, you also have your host for other cells. They call that the microbiome. Other bacteria, parasites, and other cells that work symbiotically with your body. In fact, if they weren't there, you would be dead, because they work synergistically. There's another 100 trillion there. Now, each of those cells is considered to be sentient, like it's a little person. They can think, they can eat, reproduce, eliminate. They monitor their environment, they communicate. You might wonder, what does a cell think about? It's pretty simple.
Survival.
It's kind of binary. Am I in defense or am I in growth? To kind of, what's my orientation going to be? And you can take these cells and put them in the appropriate medium in, say, a petri dish with some nutrients, and those cells will replicate independent of the body. And they've found that they will replicate depending on the environmental stress, that they can change and morph depending on the amount of environmental stress that's on these cells. So a cell under stress is going to replicate or create a different field of consciousness than something that has the right appropriate medium. So each cell has a little bioelectric field. Collectively, you have a field of consciousnness that radiates beyond your body. So we're getting into your energy conversation. And your heart has an electromagnetic pulse and will send out the signal between 8 feet to 25 feet out from your body. It just kind of radiates out. So right now, our heart energy is intermingling. And if you close your eyes right now and just take a feeling, you kind of have a sense and a knowing of the other people in the room. They just don't disappear. On one aspect, you saw them, but have you ever been somewhere, perhaps a public place, and you get the feeling someone's looking at you, and you look over and they look away? How many of you have had the thought of a friend or a family member, and they call within a day or an hour or 2 days later?
Synchronicity, yeah.
There's synchronicity. That's in quantum physics, that's the unified field. And that there's quantum entanglement, and we're all interconnected on an energetic level. Now this is kind of off the topic of procrastination and motivation, but it gives you a sense that there's a field of consciousness here, and it's influenced based on the thoughts and focus that we have at any given moment. And a friend of mine just said that she never realized that most people don't have a relationship with their inner world, their thoughts and their motives, their emotions. Because you're here, you're actually in the upper echelon of the population, because you are in that realm of self-discovery and personal development. There's a lot of people that just don't care, or they don't even know enough to care. They think that how they feel is a condition of their environment. They think of, they're at the effect of life. And part of procrastination shows up is we surrender our leadership for our life. I'm pointing to it because I remember it being written up there. So we surrender leadership for the focus of our mind. We give in to the pull of the moment or our emotional response, and we don't direct it.
We'll go back to a couple of steps of the other than conscious. Where were you going with that? Because you were saying how many of us feel like the subconscious or other than conscious is not our friend.
Right. So this is my model of consciousness. Now, there's an idea that consciousness arises from the function of our brain. I believe that we arise out of consciousness, that consciousness is embedded in everything, and that it is a byproduct of the world. You could say that the force or God or whatever, that intelligence is there, organizes all things. This chair seems fairly solid. On an electron level, you can blow it up to a point, and actually the cells or the atoms are so far apart you could walk through them. It's a wonder it's held together by anything. That is the energetic flow or the consciousness that is an organizing principle. So this here is your point of I, your self, your self-identity. But you have your mental body, your emotional body, and it extends out where you think of your friend or your family members, and their field is out here. And so there's this intersection. So we're actually trading information. So if you have ever had psychic experience or intuitive experience, I mean, everybody has the capacity. It's just most of us put limits on it because we don't think we can, so we don't do it. So, in intelligent design, if consciousness is intelligent in nature, does it make sense that you would have an aspect of your mind that would work counterproductive to your well-being?
Not really. No.
So one of the presuppositions or the beliefs that we presuppose are true, at least I presuppose are true, is that your other than conscious mind is benevolent in nature. It is always operating on your behalf. Even though there's sometimes behavior that comes up that you don't particularly like or doesn't fit the particular circumstance. So why would that behavior come up?
So you don't believe in self-sabotage?
No. I believe in misalignment, and part of procrastination is not being aligned. Your heart is not aligned with your mind and your body. There's an incongruence there. You're not all working for the same goal. Now, you consider that as a human being, and you're from little, you kind of learn how to be in the world, how to interact, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And we learn things from age 0 to 7. You're in this hypnagogic state. You're almost like in deep trance. You learn how to dress yourself. You learn how to eat, how to behave, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what's rude, when you can fart, when can't you fart. And all of these are, and we start developing all these rules on what it means to be a good person or a bad person. And those are stored on the other than conscious level. Now the value of the unconscious or the other than conscious, because if you had to relearn a skill every day, it'd be cumbersome. If you had to explain, like when you make a statement, most statements stand on their own, even though they have an internal representation for you, and it arises out of your unconscious, your subconscious, or other than conscious mind. You just accept it as a matter of fact. You don't go back and say, well, I learned that here in its relation, I believe it because it's worked in this situation, and we don't do that. It just feels like it's a part of our tapestry, part of our mind, our life. So this is part of the unconscious psychology. You have all this programming, so to speak, on what it means to be in the world. So you don't have to reinvent it or relearn it or rethink about it every day. You can kind of get from here to there in relative ease. Now, how many of you trust your other than conscious mind? Really trust it? How many of you are like, don't know, if you could? Okay. Everyone doesn't know if they really can trust it. You trust it to breathe for you 12, 15, 20 times a minute. You trust it to beat your heart on a regular basis and know when to slow it down and when to speed it up. You trust it to replicate your cells day in, day out. 1 million cells every second, come and go. New cells are born, cells are died, they're eliminated. I mean, you don't even think about it, you turn it over to the management. It's meant to process it. If you drove here in a car, you trust your other than conscious mind. You're speeding down the road at speeds of 60, 70 miles an hour, just 2 or 3 feet from another vehicle, going just as fast. And there's a certain amount of trust in their capacity. But you also trust your ability to adapt and move to circumstances. You trust your other than conscious mind all the time. And part of the problem is in the mistrust. I trust you, but only so far. And when you can begin to trust your other than conscious mind as a benevolent compatriot for your good and for your goals, you can turn over a lot of work to your other than conscious mind and not have to figure everything out consciously. You just point yourself, the way I operate now for the most part of my life, I point myself in a direction and then I turn it over to my other than conscious mind to find the plan, draw the circumstances, and assist me in making it work. For me to write all this out and give it to you in detailed form is cumbersome, so I've allowed my other than conscious mind to respond to your questions and I have 30 years of experience that I can call upon and bring in. Right. Something just escaped me that I was going to talk about. And so part of me, I just like, I wonder and I get curious. I wonder what I was going to talk about was so important. And when you try and figure it out, how many of you have been like Trivial Pursuit, or you get to start talking about a movie with somebody and say, who was that actor that played that part? That
You just can't.
it's right on the tip of my tongue, but like the more you try and force the information out, the harder it is to get. And so until next day, 2 days later, you're in the shower, you're driving, and it's like pops in like you knew it all along. It's that when you effort for it, it's harder to get. Because what do we say? I can't remember who it is. So your other than conscious mind says, wow, we can't remember who it is. You get to direct where your other than conscious mind goes. And people say, you know, I had the motivation. They say, I'm not motivated. So what do you get more of? No motivation. Now there's only a few essential motives: hunger, discomfort, pleasure, joy, reproduction. Those are motives in psychology. Those drive you on an animalistic level. Psychology, for the most part, doesn't even recognize the emotions or affects because they can't define them necessarily. Remember that you got your cellular body, I'm either in defense or I'm in growth. So, how many for you does procrastination, does it show up as a habit, like on a pretty regular basis? It's like there's a tendency, it's like if you have something you could do, you tend to think, well, I'll just do it tomorrow, or I'll just do it later. Like, I don't really feel like it right now. And so that is where procrastination, or putting things off, I wish there was a different word, because I really don't like the word procrastination, but it's what we got. So when it shows up as a habit, like a condition, everyday condition of life, then there's an anatomy of a habit. It, we have some kind of cue or stimulus in our environment which generates a pattern of behavior. And we get a particular result. Now, when these habits work for us, it's a good habit. When it doesn't seem to work for us, we call it a bad habit. But if your other than conscious mind is benevolent in nature and is always working in your behalf, this result is a benefit on some level.
You have to figure out what the payoff is.
And now this pattern, remember when you were younger, when you were learning, you were taking in and you were learning all kinds of ways to behave in the world. It may be that this pattern was born 20 years ago, and it proved really effective in that moment, or for a period of time. And you just haven't brought in a new pattern to replace it. And so part of what we're getting away from here, this in a bad habit or procrastination, is we're trying to get away from an icky feeling. If you consider yourself, your life to be somewhat stressful, then when you picture doing something that creates more stress, you want to alleviate it right away. Now, whether it's stressful or not stressful is an aspect of perception. It's what we choose to see it. There was a shoe company in 1856 that sent 2 representatives to India to survey the opportunity to sell shoes. First salesman telegraphs back, said no opportunity, nobody wears shoes. Second salesman sends a telegram, said phenomenal opportunity, nobody has shoes. So it can be work for you or against you. And the idea that, we hear optimism and pessimism, is this more full or more empty? To be accurate, I can say there's 18 ounces of water in this vessel. That's the facts. Any other quality that I put to it is my interpretation or my story. Now, our story is important. Our story is our collection of beliefs about a situation or who we are and how we are in the world. A story is just a story. There was a Stanford professor in the 70s that gave an assignment. The assignment was why to his students. They had to write a paper and answer the question why. Everyone's like, what do you mean why? How long does it have to be? What am I supposed to talk about? So just answer the question why. When they turned in the project, people had 10,000 words and 3 or 4 paragraphs and 5 pages and 20 pages. And the guy that got the A gave a 1-word answer. How do you answer the question why? Because. So as human beings, we're meaning-searching organisms. The mind is what's considered a mechanistic aspect, and it's comparing what happened yesterday to what's happening now. What's it mean about me? What meaning does this have for me? Sometimes things have no meaning, yet we make up a meaning. So when we procrastinate or put things off, we file that in as evidence that we are a particular way. It's almost like you're a lawyer building a case. You have a hypothesis. And that's really how we develop beliefs. When we're younger, we have a hypothesis about what it means to be us. And then we began gathering evidence in our experience and putting it over there that support our hypothesis. Rarely do our findings invalidate a hypothesis. We just, let's prove it, let's prove it, let's prove it. Now, if you've heard this story before, forgive me, but I was, probably 13 years ago. I was dating a younger woman, and much younger, and she was going out with her friends. And I was they were going to a bar to hang out. And I was a little put off by that. And I was getting angry. And, she was indignant, which is fine. But in that moment, I had the presence of mind just kind of step outside of myself and reflect from a witness position. And I asked the question, what am I angry about? What's the source of the anger? For me, anger is it's sourced out of fear. So what am I afraid of? I'm afraid she's going to meet somebody else, cast me aside. And what would that mean? What would that mean about me? That would mean that I wasn't valuable. I was cast-offable. I wasn't lovable. There's a whole list. And I thought, where was the first time I felt that? Or what was the last time I felt that? And I went back and drew a correlation from every relationship all the way to my very first big significant relationship. And I thought, was it ever there before that? And it was. It was when I was 8 years old. And I was in class one day, and I wrote a love letter. It said, Dear Jeannie, not her real name. Dear Jeannie, do you love me? Yes or no? Jeannie. I folded it up, handed it to Mike. I said, Janie. Mike handed it to Frank. Frank's like, what's this? And pass it to Janie. Turn around, pass it to Janie. She's, you know, I'm like all expected. And she opens it up and looks at it like, looks at me, looks at the note. Folds it up, gets out of her little desk, walks up to the front of the room, hands it to the teacher. I'm like, what's going on? And Mrs. Johnson, also not her name, bouffant hairdo, cat eye glasses. She actually had to pull her glasses up, worked on her chain around her neck, and reading it. And she's like, what's this? And she goes, points to me. And I'm like wide-eyed, I know, and I try and sink down further. And she stands up and gives this big sigh and says, like, this is very inappropriate for a boy your age. You don't say these kind of things to girls.
Ouch.
And in that moment, I made some decisions about girls, love, life, being understood. I didn't know it at the time, but I formed this hypothesis. You can love women, but you can't trust them. Your love will be rejected sooner or later, so just wait. And people won't understand you. They won't understand your motives, so why even explain yourself? Well, having the background that I have working with people and actually knowing, you know, in my present day, how life works and how the mind works, I went back in my mind's eye to that earlier time. And I pulled my essence out of my 8-year-old and pretend the classroom's in front of me and we're watching everything. I said, Danny, look at Jamie. She's 8. She's 8. She's never had a love note before. She doesn't know what to do with it. And it probably would have helped if you at least talked to her once or twice before you sent it. And I said, you have no idea the women that you're gonna meet over the years. You're gonna have a lot of fun, a lot of good time. You're gonna go to 18 different countries. You're gonna walk on fire. You're gonna jump out of an airplane. You're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. And I could feel myself start to like rise up. And I said, look at Mrs. Johnson. She retired 3 years after this. This is 1968. That meant she's 65. That meant that she was born in the early 1900s, where children didn't have feelings, they didn't have a mind, they didn't have a life of their own, really. Their job was to cram all this knowledge in them and kick them out the door. And so no wonder she couldn't get that. She didn't see, you know, that you're a lover. And so in that moment, I created doubt in my story. And when you create doubt, you give the opportunity for something new to come in. And when in that telling, I reframed, put a different frame around that situation that empowered me. So when I said earlier, when you procrastinate, it doesn't mean that you're broken. It means that there's something missing in your strategy and thinking that's allowing you to become discouraged when you think about doing something. Something in your self-definition allows procrastination to creep in because you're not taking, that sounds chastising, you're not taking responsibility for your thoughts. You're not taking leadership, you're not taking ownership. And it's not a bad thing. You'll survive through life putting things off.
It's like that kid tying the shoelaces.
In what way?
They're just going through the motions. They're not really thinking about it. It's not an analytical. He's only 7 years old. He can do that, but he doesn't have the consciousness level to be conscious about deciding, you know, when he's going to wear shoes and why he's going to wear shoes
Right.
and all that.
So we revert back in time to this behavioral pattern as a matter of ecology of mind because it's simpler. It's hard to rethink our behavior.
You're coasting.
Yeah.
You're not engaging.
And so,
You're not thinking.
and part of this is, you know, it's useful for us to rely on other than conscious patterns.
Unless you do it all the time.
So it's useful from an ecological point of view to where we don't have to reinvent the universe. But when it shows up as a defect in, or let's see, not a defect, but unproductive behavior for your life, or what you're really up to.
Right.
And so you get this behavioral pattern, you get a good feeling result. Whether you, let's say you pick up your phone and you go through Facebook and stuff, like, oh, look at that, look at that. And it's like, it feels good. And then later when you're looking at it, it felt good at the moment, and you reflect back on it, says, yeah, but I didn't do this. Then you feel terrible about not doing what you think you're supposed to be doing. It's connecting the Facebook to this negative kinesthetic or negative feeling. Now, to where you realize that this is a pattern that's going to lead to something you don't like. And then you get to choose it. So it's about bringing the unconscious into conscious awareness. And how do you do that? You just call it forward. Because you get to say.
You call what? Call,
You call your unconscious process and say, what's this about?
okay.
Let me explain that a little further. Most of what we experience as conscious awareness is what's referred to as a transderivational search, where what you're currently aware of is in response to a question that you've gone back and searched all your files for and then come up with an answer or a solution. For instance, give me a word.
Love.
Love. Give me another word.
Dogs.
Dogs. Give me another word.
Ferrari.
Ferrari. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
How many of you are thinking, how do those connect?
I love it.
Did you know that I was going to ask you for 3 words?
No.
Did you prepare ahead of time?
No.
No. How did those words just pop in your head?
I think so.
And then usually once a person comes up with one word, they start drawing correlations and associations to other words in their mind. So what you're currently consciously aware of is in response to a question that you've tendered. Up here, the behavior we come up is how can we escape this pain? How can we escape this discomfort? Oh, I'll just go on Facebook, or I'll watch a movie, or open up some wine. All the above.
And then take a nap.
I'll just sleep in today. I won't get up. Now, one of the things that happened to me when I was back in '84 when I didn't get out of bed, the significance of that was 1984 in the Summer Olympics. So I got to watch championship people, and I got to watch the life stories of Carl Lewis and Mary Decker Slaney and Greg Louganis. And right now I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Because it changed my state. It changed my perception. I guess you could consider depressed. Because I was overwhelmed at what I had created that didn't work, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And when you're in that state of overwhelmment, you can't find your way out of a paper bag. Because anything you do seems like too much effort, and you're not enough. The perfection thing, you just need to realize that you're never going to be enough. You never were enough, and you're never going to be perfect. And you just have to do the best you can. And the best you can is good enough at any given moment. When you get tangled up doing the tango, you tango out of it. From Scent of a Woman. I love that line. So it's the idea that you're not a static person in life. Like who you are is not static. It's not a given. It's not part of the woodwork. You're a dynamic process. When I said you, a million cells like that, created, destroyed, again and again. You're constantly breathing. Every 7 years, you replace every cell in your body. Every cell. You're not the same person you were 3 years ago. Half of you is different. Now, how does your consciousness know how to create you the next moment? It's based on your references to the past, to your story. So all you need to do is write a new story. Seems really simple. But if you were to give up your past, because your past is just an interpretation of some things that happened, and some of them didn't mean what they thought you meant. Like, I thought that you couldn't trust women. And sooner or later, once I gave up that story, I had a completely different experience of life. Or women, which is life for me. So the story is just a collection of beliefs, and realize that there's no such thing as a belief. What do you mean? How many believe that there's no such thing as belief? None of you. All of you think that the beliefs are real, right?
I guess that's how you look at it.
Belief is just something you keep thinking.
Okay, do you have a purse there? Can you pull out some of your beliefs?
I don't have any.
See, you can't reach in your pocket and pull out, let me show you my beliefs. You can't, they exist as a concept of mind. And we all know that one person can believe one thing and another person believe another thing, and they could be completely different. And both people work in, their life's work. They're valid for them. There's 7 billion people on the planet. Right now, look at someone else in the room and just pick somebody out and imagine trading brains with them. In that moment, you realize they don't have your brain. Yet, how often do you talk to other people, respond and interact with other people as if they had your brain? See, each of us has our own collection of beliefs, values, perceptions, history, references. So even people that we get along with and we think we have some commonalities with, we recognize that they're actually a completely different person, a different data set than what we have. There's 7.5 billion people on the planet. When I first started talking about this, there were 7 billion or 6 billion people on the planet. And still, no two people have the same brain. No two people have the same references. The idea that we are talking about, that you can be autonomous, that you can actually direct your brain to create the life you want, is where all this lies. And the procrastination is just a default set where we just it's a knee-jerk habitual response. That doesn't sound as pretty as it's just a learned pattern. It's a knee-jerk habitual response that we use to respond to life in a way that worked one time, at least one time in our life, and then we've just repeated the pattern again and again. So this is referred to as homeostasis. This is the baseline. There's a physical homeostasis, there's a mental homeostasis, and an emotional homeostasis or an emotional set point. And when I thought this was really intriguing when I was in psychology and I first came up with it, is for every peak experience, there's an idea that we go the other way. And Olympic athletes will talk about it, after, winning the gold medal and being on top of the world, they are depressed for the next few months. Because suddenly, everything they were working for has been accomplished. Now they don't have any goals, they don't know what to do, and they're not training the same, they don't have the same objectives. So part of, our peaks, there is a balancing act that goes on where we feel a little negative. And that hopefully we come back up and reach some realm of homeostasis if we can, kind of exist in this area. it's considered though, and these are the stress chemicals down here, fight or flight. Now, as a human being, you're both animal and spirit. 99% of who you are, you can't see, touch, or feel. 1% that you can point to and exist in physicality, we spend 99% of our time on. Yet it only represents 1% of who we are. And you know that interacting with other people in the world, other people have an opinion of who you are, an idea of who you are, and you know they have no idea who you are. Like they only see a bit, like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to who I am. So as an animal, that's our default. That's where our instinct rises, our need for survival. And this is where the procrastination comes from, this pattern. You know, this, we'll call this an icky feeling. This icky feeling is the stress chemical that we try to avoid, and so we put it off, we find something else to do. And it's really all just based on how we're thinking about it. So when I first saw this model of homeostasis, I thought, well, who gets to say, well, before I go there, as in modern life, all our cells, more often than not, are leaning in defense. We got traffic and time and deadlines and expectations, you know, these goals that we have, and business demands and job demands and spousal and kids, and like, and we're on a schedule. How many of you get up and go to work and drive in traffic? Or if you just work at home, it's like there's other people that they say, well, she just works at home. Like, it doesn't matter if I call her or pop in on her. Like, she's just, her time's her own. I get that all the time. Even at home with my wife, she knows we both work at home, and my door will be closed, and she'll come in and start talking to me. And yet, when I do that to her, she's like, get out of here. So it's considered that in modern life, we spend 70% of our time in the stress zone. Not so much to where it's debilitating, but it's kind of this slow drip IV of stress chemicals in our system that kind of just is irritation or anger or frustration just underneath the surface. And why do you think this happens more often than not?
Mindset story sets it up that way.
Well, it's giving in to circumstance. It's a default response, and it's not making joy and happiness a criteria of life.
Right.
We set it up as if, well, maybe if I do this or do that, then I'll be happy.
Right.
We don't decide ahead of time, today I'm gonna be happy and joyful. So when I first saw this, I thought, well, if this is a peak and this is normal, what were to happen if we were to condition ourselves and this was our new normal?
It's doable.
And then your peak experiences were way up here, and your low experiences were right where other people's highs were.
Mm-hmm.
This is just conditioning. You can do this.
Self-actualization, actually. You can do that.
How many of you are familiar with the term self-actualization? Since you all know what it is, I won't talk about it. Self-actualization is the idea where we're operating at the pinnacle of our ability. We're hitting on all cylinders. We're using the majority of our resources in a positive way. So when we're down here in this 70% zone, and we think about doing something that creates an icky feeling, we will avoid it unless we condition ourselves to look at the long picture. And remember the other than conscious responds to our current question. Part of what, do we need to talk about this anymore? Not for now. So, for the most part, we have impotent goals and intentions. And it's not by design. We just kind of surrender that. Remember when I first started out, when we think we create this declaration, this intention, and we just expect everything, all parts of us to line up with it. Well, there's a process called a well-formed outcome. And one is, usually our outcomes are not specific enough. They're too ambiguous. Ambiguity breeds hesitation. If you're unclear on the next step, you won't take a step. And usually, remember, I should say this too, just a condition of the mind. The mind cannot not think of something. Meaning, if I tell you don't think of a pink elephant, don't think about it. Don't think of a little blue bunny right now with cherub wings flying around the ceiling. Don't think about it. Now there's two. See, when you hear parents say, don't run, you'll fall, the only way the mind can conceive of that is falling first and then attempting to create some picture of not falling. So that's why you want to get in the habit of, and it took me a long time to do this. I'd catch myself after the fact, and now I can catch myself before the fact. Now I just say it. Where I say what I want or what I want to have occur rather than what I don't want to occur. And I'm constantly correcting people. They say, don't drive too fast, and I say, drive safe. Don't have too much fun. So we want to make sure that our outcome is specific. And then we have outcomes for just about everything we do. We have outcome for how we want to feel that day. We create an outcome for how we want to feel this week. We create an outcome generally for our life. There was a term in philosophy that I love that the Greeks have, eudaimonia. Happiness over the long haul. Most people live happiness as if it's a result of what they're doing or who they're with, instead of a condition of living. So some of these psychological, some different mindsets about how we want to move in the world will change our relationship to our goals and our procrastination. So we want to make sure that it's specific. We want that it have evidence-based. And what will we see, touch, and feel when we have this outcome? Now it's important to think about it this way. How good will you feel? And become associated to that feeling. Not like you're watching some movie somewhere else, like you're living it, like you're actually on the roller coaster. Where you feel the excitement, what are you going to see? What kind of smiles? What kind of celebration? See, we're over here in this defective pattern, we see all the agony and the pain. We're not, if people that are phobic about flying, they never see themselves landing. They just see themselves on the plane forever and ever and crashing someday. People that get on and get off and actually anticipate their vacation, they see themselves laying on the beach, having Mai Tais and pina coladas, and having fun. They don't think about losing their luggage or all these other things. And people that, you know, there's a lot of people that signed up to be here. And then I get back, will you hold this again? Maybe, maybe not. And a couple people on the way here says, I almost didn't come. Because you think about, well, I gotta get dressed, I gotta get in the car, there's gonna be traffic. There's never traffic in Dallas.
Yeah, I was talking myself out of it about 5 minutes before it's time to leave. I don't know what the hell that's about. You know, it's something I want to do. I don't have to do it, but it's better than sitting at home. And then about 5 to 10 minutes before I should be moving to go, I talk myself out of it. It's like,
Well, maybe this metaphor will help. In 1988, I walked on burning hot coals for the first time.
burning what?
Burning hot coals,
Okay.
1,200 degree coals, a bed of coals. And in 2004, I became an instructor. And since then, I've walked on hot coals almost 600 times. And after, this is the interesting phenomena. Most people, I used to say, what do you do? And I said, I'm a firewalk instructor. And they go, firewalk? Why would anyone want to do that? And at the time, I was like, that question never entered my mind. Why wouldn't you want to walk on coals? Why wouldn't you want to experience a part of yourself that rarely gets called into being on a daily basis?
Having stepped on one, I've stepped on, I've been burned before, and it's like once, you know,
I
once
was a Boy
burned,
Scout,
twice shy.
went camping, and you know you're out walking around and
Pow.
you get burned because you're not in that mind-body state of congruence. And after you see 3, 4, 5 people walk across coals, you say, well, they're people. I'm a people. I think I can do that. And it doesn't take you very long to know that it's possible. The real lesson in the firewalk is when you're standing here with this bed of coals in front of you that's glowing, there's fire on the side. I always like to put logs on the side and so there's flames shooting up. And you get to think about walking to the other side. You have a sense of fear or congruence. At this moment, the real firewalk takes place. How do you know you're ready to take the first step?
You're not pissing in your pants.
Well, part of it is you know that when you're here monitoring what's going on inside, and there's a little bit of kinesiology here, as I teach people in the workshop that when all systems are go, you trust your other than conscious mind, and you'll feel a little pull. And then you step into it. Most people feel the pull, go, wait a minute, I'm not ready. If you feel, when you're here, and if you're feeling fear, then are you focused on walking the other side, or are you focusing on the coals?
The first step.
You're focusing on the coals.
Ah.
And people have images in their mind such as, what if I fall? When they ask me that, I said, well, how often do you fall during a week? Never. Yet, are you suddenly going to fall? Only if you don't think about not falling. So the moment you align your heart with your mind and your body, with walking the other side, you focus on walking the other side, then you listen for the pull. And what happens is when we talk ourselves out of it, we think about the traffic, we think about the uncomfortableness, like say we're going to a party, and it's like, oh, I don't know anybody's there. It's like, and it's like, it's farther away, and I'm gonna get back really late.
Yeah.
We don't think about having fun at the party. It amazes me how many people go to a party intending not to have a good time. That's part of the outcome. And you can form outcomes like today. Like when you go to a talk, I want to get at least 3 good ideas. Doesn't matter if I'm a good instructor or not. I could be the worst instructor. If you're a good student, you can pull anything out of what's presented. It's evidence-based. We want it based in time measurement. By when? It has to be your outcome. I had a client come to me that wanted me to hypnotize his wife because she wanted to divorce him.
And the what? And the,
She wanted to divorce him, and he wanted me to hypnotize her, so to reframe how she thought about him.
okay.
I said, I'll work with you, but I won't work with your wife. She evidently has an experience of you that you're not present to. And so it needs to be your outcome. Sometimes when people come forward to stop smoking, which not many people do that anymore because most people don't smoke, but every now and then somebody does, it's like my doctor tells me I have to quit. My wife wants me to quit. Well, you gotta want it. If you
That's
don't
right.
want it, then you're not aligned.
Right.
And so when you think about from here on out, you want your goals, your intentions, your outcomes, you want to be aligned, heart, mind, all parts of you. How many of you have created an intention to do something, go somewhere, and part of you is lagging? Like, I don't know if I want to do that. So this is when you talk to that inner part. When I say all parts of you, we have different sub-personalities that are created at different times of our life. Your 8-year-old is still alive in there and made decisions about who you're going to be, and they're there today. Your 15-year-old, most people's response to anger and disappointment, was generated in their teens. I can't believe you're doing that to me.
Yeah.
It's like you can see that teenager rear its ugly head. And I can see, I don't, but I can see the angry 15-year-old typing on Facebook for comments about political issues. And it's like, so your outcome has to be your own, and it has to match personal ecology. It has to support your life. When you talked about self-sabotage, this is where it comes into play, where you create an intention. But that intention, if you were to get it, it would compromise some aspect of your story, or it would compromise relationship if you want to be successful in business. There's an idea sometimes we have about how to be successful in business that will detract from being in love. So we're having a good time. Sometimes you gotta work hard, you gotta put in all these hours. But I like to have fun. I like to go out. And so which part wins? So when there's this incongruence between internal objectives, you have cognitive dissonance, you have split thinking. And so you pacify the part that doesn't want to, and you listen to the word, you invited that part to your party and address their reservation. And it could be your serious part, it could be your responsible part, it could be some aspect of you, and you just talk to it, like, so what's the reservation about here? What's the worst that can happen? Well, nobody will talk to me, so I don't want to go. And you get your creative part, and you say, what if we could find a way to interact with 5 people? Perhaps, I'm shy. I used to have this definition that I was shy. That used to be part of my story. And I would have these little minor anxiety attacks where I just freeze up in a social situation. If somebody asked me a deeper question that I didn't know how to answer, it's like suddenly the whole room would start spinning. And so I began searching out other people that needed a friend. They were sitting off in the corner, and I'd go over and talk to them. I became a host. I took on that it was my job to make them feel comfortable, take the pressure off me, and so that worked for a while. And then I got more skills in interacting with people, and it's all learning based. Your other than conscious mind, if you have difficulty in one area, it's just a matter of upgrading the software to operate in a new arena. And you get curious, like, how can I How can I make it fun? How can I enjoy this? True story. My stepson hit a curb. And, well, he was picking me up somewhere. I'm walking out to the car, I noticed his front tire's almost flat. And I look at it, and I says, you need air in this tire. And I said, we'll just stop up here. And brand new tires, they're like maybe 3 weeks old. And we go to put air in it, and I'm looking at it, and I said, the rim's bent. I said, so you hit a curb, huh? And suddenly he couldn't remember when it happened or how it happened. And I said, that doesn't matter. It's just like, the rim's bent, we're gonna need to replace the rim. And so I had this brilliant idea that we were gonna go to a salvage yard and find one and take it off of a junk car. Never been to a salvage yard before, but I had called up one time and got one for a previous car, and it cost me 20 bucks, that was it. Like, I wanted this to be painless. And so we go to a salvage yard, and it looked like a graveyard for cars. They were stripped down. As soon as a car comes in, there's all these guys that come in and take all these parts off and stuff. And you're lucky if you can find a wheel, because there's one of the first things that go. And so I'm go to the first one, had to stand in line to get in there. It's hot, it's 104 degrees, and no tire, we had to leave. And then so this other one has 4 cars, and there's a fairly new one, so it could have tires on there, or wheels. So we go there. Now they're stand in line, go out in the heat, and all the little Toyota Corollas are gone. They're stripped clean. So I start looking and said, well, maybe a Toyota Camry will work. Found one with the wheels, and had to engineer a way to get it. So the whole thing, I thought, in and out an hour. 6 hours later, I'm dehydrated, heat stroke, heat exhaustion, not heat stroke. Like, I was seeing double almost. And we're way out, and we gotta carry this tire there. So I ended up carrying it, and long story short, it didn't fit the vehicle. So I could be, and in fact, my stepson wanted to give up halfway. Let's go to lunch. Let's go to lunch and come back. And I said, I am not coming back here. I did not want to go and come back. To me, that was worse than staying.
Right.
That's the picture I painted.
That's interesting.
And I said, I'm not quitting. I thought, here's a teaching moment. I'm not quitting, I'm getting this wheel off. And so I got it off and find out it didn't fit the car. I had to buy it anyways. And so I could have been in, I wasted an entire day. It took me 3 days to recover. To finally get all the water back in me.
Yeah.
But it was a terrific bonding experience. I couldn't have engineered a better opportunity to connect and go through some trial. Because you get to really see who people are when things are at the worst. So I ask the question a lot of times, how can I make this fun? I also ask, how can I make this easy? How many of you at times feel overwhelmed at what lies in front of you? You're trying to eat a whole pie at once. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I used to use that all the time, and a young girl says, I like elephants. Now I use pies. Try to sit down and eat the whole pie in one bite, one sitting. It's better eating smaller bites. So anything you do, the moment you feel overwhelmed, red flag, I'm thinking too big. How can I make it easy? What's the smallest thing I can do to move myself in the direction I want? You chunk down into a smaller size. See, the conscious mind, our executive portion, cannot process more than 7 bits of information plus or minus 2 bits. Think of a telephone number, 10 digits. If you take all 10 digits at once, it's overwhelming. 3, 3, and 4, a lot easier to remember. What do you mean remember phone numbers? I just punch the button in my phone. So, how many of you have downloaded the 20 mind hacks?
Didn't know there was one.
Got it in my email box.
Okay.
Looking forward to looking at it.
Well, I cover a lot of the things I'm talking about today. You can get yours by going to yesdaniel.com, 20 hacks. And you put in your email address and then you get this copy. And part of it is, chunking down, taking smaller bites. If you feel overwhelmed. So when you have a particular icky feeling, instead of saying, oh, I don't like that, and start moving somewhere else, it's like, isn't that interesting? I have an icky feeling. I'm picturing something in a particular way that's not productive. And in your story, I'll write it up here. In your story, if your goal, are you the heroine or the villain in your story? Are you the effect of circumstance or are you a creator?
Everyone's always a creator.
Well, it depends on how you think about it. Some people don't think they're very creative. Some people think creativity lies in the realm of art and music and crafts and Martha Stewart. You can be creative in life by finding creative solutions. And creativity just means that you step outside of your normal, predictable, knee-jerk habitual response and consider options. How can I make this fun? How can I make this easy? How many different ways could I approach this? If I reduce this down to the ridiculous, what's the smallest piece of thing I can do to move me or lean me in the direction of what I want to do? Robert Schuller used to say, he's a minister, said, beginning is half done. If you can overcome inertia of that standing still and just move in that direction, then you just follow through. You're half done. But what about the completion side of it? How do you see yourself to the completion? You just think, when you have a big task, commit to the ridiculous. Sometimes I commit to 15 minutes or smaller, commit to 5. I'm going to work on this for 5 minutes. I'm just going to organize it. I'm just going to set it up. Abraham Maslow, the father of American psychology, said the fastest way to shift your emotions is to move your body. The fastest way to shift your emotions is to move your body. So once I get in action for 5 minutes, I'm changing my biochemistry. My other than conscious mind is saying, oh, he's going to do this. So let's orient our systems so we can complete it. And then once you get into it, how many times have you put off doing something for a while until you absolutely had to? And once you started it, it went easy. And you're thinking, why didn't I just do this earlier? Because once you get in the activity of it, then you get in the flow of it. And all you have to overcome, this is why he said beginning is half done, you just have to overcome that inertia. And good ways to do that is, how many of you have been in the movies before? And let's say they're about to blow something up, and it takes 2 hands. And they say, on 3. 3, 2, 1. And wait, is it on 1 or after 1? So you count 3, 2, 1. Somebody, I think Mel Robbins has her count to 5. Count down from 5. For me, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is hypnotic. It puts people in a trance. So I use 3, 2, 1. Or actually for myself, I'm a child of the 60s, and there was a cartoon called Adam Ant. And he would always lift something up, hoop, and Adam Ant. So I go, hoop, and Adam. That's what I say for myself, just to get myself moving. So, what you say to yourself, just that, like, if we get caught up in the thinking, if you tend to not get out of bed, if you tend to not get out the door for the party, you just become what they refer to as an automaton or a robot, and just do it. Like 3, 2, 1. Like, do it. Just get up, get in the shower, go. And if working out is something like that, then I find that putting my clothes out the night before, having my clothes ready to get into, so I don't have those decision moments where I waffle. And this was a lesson in the '84 Olympics when I was watching Greg Louganis, who's a phenomenal diver. And I've used what I've learned there to work with professional athletes ever since, is that once he started, it was one fluid moment to the time he hit the water. There was no break that you could see. And because if you throw darts or do something else, there's that little moment, shoot baskets, there's a little moment just before you release where you can let a thought come in. So if you can make it one automatic moment, you get up. Now, I used to be a snoozer, meaning that I would hit the snooze button, and I'd actually set my alarm 45 minutes ahead of time, because I knew I was going to hit that snooze button at least 5 times. And once I began learning all this stuff and how the mind works, I thought, how stupid to do that. Why don't I just set it, get up, and be done with it? So I'm going to tell you how I did it, and then you can take aspects of it and put it in your life. One, it was too easy to get derailed. So I took the clock and put it over on the dresser. So in order to turn it off, I actually had to get out of bed. Then I changed. It was no longer an alarm clock. It was an opportunity clock.
There you go.
And so instead of alarming me and to get up, get out of bed, it's like it was awakening me to the opportunity for the day. And so I began to create a pattern, a new pattern. So since I've been practicing hypnosis since I was 13, it was easy for me to fall asleep. I just lay down, I just shut everything down, and I start to drift off. So I set the alarm, or the clock, to go off in 15 minutes. And I laid down, and my plan was I was going to get out of bed and change my physiology. And we're going to do something like this so you can get the actual experience of it. So I would fall asleep, it went off, I sat up in bed, yes! Got out of bed, turned it off, and walked deliberately out the door. And as I was hitting the door, I would say, this is the day the Lord had made, be happy, glad in it. Or this is a day of opportunity. I interrupted my sleep. I forgot that there's someone recording down the hall. So then I did it all over again. It went off, I sat up. Yes! Got up. Now this is a victory sign that you see across the world. When I was in college, I worked with Special Olympics, blind Down syndrome kids. Tell them they win. They're like this. Nobody tells them that this is how this is how we're wired. You do this victory. Like, if you do this, it changes how you feel inside. Turn it off. Marched out the door deliberately. This is a day of opportunity. I did it 5 times. I've not used an alarm clock since. I use it occasionally as a backup, but I always wake up, my other than conscious mind wakes me up just before it goes off.
Before it goes off, yeah. Yeah.
And I only use it as a backup if I absolutely have to be out the door, and for some reason I think I'm a little tired. And So that is how I circumvented that habit. Now this habit pattern, this is the pattern. Result, stimulus, cue, and this could be a feeling. It could be an external cue in your environment. And this is where you get to begin to look at when you typically procrastinate on things. Do you procrastinate on everything? Probably not. There's just certain things that you put off in your life where procrastination may sneak in. So you begin to, so instead of it being pervasive, it becomes situational. This is global thinking. We chunk down to a situation and let's handle one situation. For me, it was like snoozing, and I was able to shift that. So you shift one aspect. You don't have to like totally reinvent your life. One aspect that you've been, how many of you want to write a book? So we use that as an example. Sit down 5 minutes. Just a book by, you don't even have to come up with the title, a book by Daniel Dinovie. And kind of like, I want this book to be about something like this. And knowing that it's a rough draft, you're just gonna spend 5 minutes with it. And you might just set it up in the format, in Word or whatever processing you're gonna use. And not put anything in it, but it's sitting there, it's ready. And all you have to do is write one word at a time. The journey of 1,000 miles is accomplished step by step, one after another after another. And I saw all of you walk in here, so I know it's inside you that you have the capacity to be unstoppable. You did not just get up and walk when you were a baby. You fell down again, again, and again. You were never embarrassed. You saw those other people walking around. You said, I'm going to do that. You pulled yourself up and you just walked one more time and you fell down. And that's all you have to do. And you set in writing your book, you can set an intermediate goal of writing at least one sentence, one complete sentence every day. And you give yourself the latitude to write more. If you're learning to meditate, I teach meditation. I teach people, give yourself that you sit down and and watch your breathing for 5 minutes. And give yourself the latitude to go 15 or 20 if you want to. But 5 minutes is enough. If you get 5 minutes, it's a success. And in meditation, the things that most people consider to be unproductive is they can't quiet their mind. Like, my mind's too busy. When you catch your mind going off on a side trail, you just bring it back to your breathing. When you catch it going off, you just bring it back to your breathing. You may spend your entire 5 minutes just catching the horse and bringing it back, catching the horse and bringing it back. That is a good meditation. That's mind training. That's focusing your mind where you want it to go. And so you create the conditions where you always win. And you basically do that by setting the standards so low that you can hit them. At least you have your front end goal and then you have your high end goal. If I at least hit this, then I know that I did fine. If you want the recipe on how to win every time, would that be useful to you?
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Just compete against someone much worse than you.
But if you want to get better, go play with people that are much better than you.
That's very
See,
And then watch them and follow them, and that's how I did Whitewater, and it was like,
tennis.
God, like using a drug. I mean, it was like bam.
as soon as I say just play someone or compete against someone worse than you, you immediately understand that winning is not the only thing.
Right.
It's who you become in the process. And this is where perfection gets in the way, because we think of it as an end goal. instead of a process of living and growing and getting untangled in the tango.
I heard a really good acronym for FAIL. It completely changes it. It's first attempt in learning. I love that, first attempt in learning. So you can do many attempts.
Steal that if it works for you. First attempt in learning. I'm a master practitioner, trainer in neurolinguistic programming, and one of the presuppositions is that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. In game theory, there's two sets of games. There's finite games and infinite games. In a finite game, there's a beginning and an end, there's a set of rules, there's a conduct, there is a result that you either achieve or you don't achieve. Like basketball, football, baseball. You either get the report in on time or you don't. So inside that finite game, you can fail. But if you're playing the infinite game, which is your life, then there's a large number of finite games that take place. So if you don't get the result you want in this game, you change your approach, and in this game you get to play different. And if you don't get the result, you change your approach, you change your mindset, you change how you're acting, get a different result. And so the idea is a win over time, or get the result over time, and it's a progression. So we don't seek perfection, we seek progression. That changes how we begin something. You can begin it and do it horribly. You can begin to write your book, and I wrote 300 pages in 2004. The book was The Path of Courage. I put it away and I read it 6 months later and I hated it. I couldn't even wrap my head around beginning to edit it. It was so bad. I deleted it. With the idea that that book was inside me already, and I would rewrite it. And that book actually became the foundation of my workshop called Unleashed and Unstoppable, with the firewalk experience. I now have a coaching program. If you go there, this ends up at the Unleashed and Unstoppable coaching program that I'm launching. But, I mean, you can look at what's there. It's like 30-day deep dive, and then there's 6 months of support beyond that. I'm just shifting your relationship to fear. And part of what's there, what stops us, is fear. Fear of failure, fear of not achieving it, of looking bad. We have a lot invested in looking good for other people. Once you get a little older, some of you are quite young. Once you get older, you do get to a point where, like, you don't give a fuck what other people think.
That's right.
Like, it's a waste of time. And, you know, you're the only person you're with 24/7, 365. The only person. Even if you're married to someone else or your relationship with somebody else, like, they have their own stuff to deal with. Every time you look in the mirror, you're the person you see. Isn't it incumbent, isn't it your responsibility to be your own best friend? To build yourself up rather than tear yourself down? If that's your story, like, I'm my own best friend, would you ever be right, like, if you were your own child, would you want them to fail? Would you say, you no good, stupid, you should know better? No, you would raise them up, edify them. Yeah, you felt this time. Get up, dust yourself off. You'll do better next time. Learn from your mistakes. Get back in the batter's box. So part of this pattern, if we can interrupt it right here, because once it gets up here, it's automatic. It's like we're running on our old systems. But in the beginning, right after the stimulus comes up, like for me, it was the alarm clock, the opportunity clock. So I had a pattern interrupt. And on this here is the first thing I talk about, pattern interrupt. And a pattern interrupt is anything different than what's predictable. How that works is you've all been in a conversation at one point in your life where there's been an interruption. somebody gets up to go to the bathroom, or the waitress comes. And once they leave or once they come back, it's like, what were we talking about? And how many of you have a brilliant idea sitting at your desk or sitting in a room, and you go outside, it's like,
Now, what was that going on?
what was I coming out here for? What did I want? Or I come up, my office is upstairs, I go down in the kitchen and I get asked a question, it's like, I can't even remember why I came downstairs.
Mhm.
And then I get something else, and then I go upstairs, as soon as I sit down at my desk, I wanted that other thing. And so that stimulus in my office reminded me what I wanted, and it interrupted my pattern. And because it wasn't a hard and fast habit, something that I repeated over again, then it was gone forever, until I went back and found the trigger that initiated what I really wanted. So you can interrupt your pattern. When I do that, for instance, like for smoking for a client, like one of the first things they see is bringing their hand up to their face.
That's right.
And so I have them and I say, stop! I interrupt your pattern, now push your hand down and put the cigarette back in the pack. And then I have them imagine bringing it up again and then stop. Put it back in. So you create a pattern in your head. You visualize how you want to go. And the brain cannot it cannot not think of something, but whatever you vividly imagine, your unconscious cannot tell the difference.
That's right.
So what if that interruption of pattern doesn't work for you? Does that mean you have to do it more times, or you have to come up with a different interruption?
You may have a bigger, more outlandish interruption. Now, if stop doesn't work for you, because sometimes you might have what is considered be a polarity responder. If someone tells you no, you say, I'm going to do it anyways. Or you can do that. Now, I clap my hands and I raise my hand, yes. That is so contrary to the way most people get out of bed. So the bigger, more outlandish you can do it, the more memorable, the more it sticks. If you've done any memory work in identifying, the more bigger and outlandish you can make an image in your head, the more likely you are to remember it.
Did you do that because putting the alarm clock bar was not enough? Or?
I wanted to reframe or reinvent how I began the day. So this would be a good time to have that example. Go ahead and stand up on your 2 feet. There's a couple things I want you to do. You may have done this before, but point your hand out in front of you. And then I want you, just watch me at first. I want to have you keep your eye line on your arm and then turn around as far back as you can until it's uncomfortable and notice where your finger ends up. Go ahead and do that. And then notate and remember where your finger ends up. Okay, now come back forward. Close your eyes for a moment. I'm going to do a 10-second visualization. Pretend you're Gumby, that your body's made out of rubber and a wire. And in your mind's eye, see yourself doing the same thing again, but you follow your arm and you're going to go around 180 degrees, 360 degrees, around and around and around, like you're made of rubber, again and again. Okay, now open your eyes and do the same thing again, and just see where you end up this time. Was it further? Some of you much further than time. That was a 10-second visualization. How many of you had lemons before?
Had what?
A lemon?
Oh, yeah.
A citrus? Imagine in your hand that you're holding a lemon and it's waxy and it's been cut in half. You can bring it up to your nose and you can smell
I
it.
can already feel it.
And you can bring it up to your mouth and actually begin to take a nice big bite of it. How many of you find that your mouth is salivating?
Yes.
My
Right
cheeks
now.
are
Yes.
hurting.
Yeah.
That is just, again, 10 seconds. So you cannot afford the luxury of a negative thought.
That's true.
It registers in your body immediately. And it's that easy also to shift where your focus is and shift your experience. We make it hard because we keep saying, I'm not motivated, or I'm just procrastinating. So that's all you can just do more of the same. So I'm gonna have you clap your hands and like your, okay, clap your hands. This is something phenomenal. Woo! Yeah. A little harder, a little harder. Now, something interesting about that is none of you were not smiling. You were all smiling because we have this associated with times when we saw something amazing, phenomenal. We were like, yeah, look at that. And so that calls up all those feelings again. So that is anchored, and that's a resource that you already own that you can call up. Now I want you to do what I do and take your fingertips like this, and right here at your collarbone, just underneath, about 2 inches, just tap. You can change it, just tap. You might feel a little tender right there. Now make a little fist. Now do it like, oh, like you're king of the jungle. Now I want you to come up and go, huh, 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 huh. Yes! Yes! How many of you feel different right now than you did 5 minutes ago?
Awesome.
See, that is shifting our biochemistry. It's raising the bar, and we can choose to have, like for the next 30 days, I'm gonna give you a goal to feel good, make it a goal, an outcome every day to feel good. Do something that feels good. You can go ahead and have a seat. See, when I said earlier the fastest way to shift your emotions is to move your body,
Yeah.
get out and go for a walk. And when some people walk, they meander. And you can look at all the beautiful things. Helen Keller used to say, I don't understand how people can go for a walk for an hour and come back and not report they saw anything beautiful. Don't they realize they have eyes? When I go to the gym and think about working out, I remember a friend of mine that has been in a wheelchair since he was a baby, unable to walk. And I think I get to work out. I have the opportunity to move my body. And I move it in a way. There's a congruent way to move your body. When you're depressed, we talked about depression, there's a certain physiology that's associated with depression. What might it be?
Slouching,
Slouching.
downward look.
Downward look. My tone of voice might be
Monotone.
monotone. If I was to say, I have something to talk to you about, I'm really, really excited. It's incongruent. So you act as if the way you want to be. Shakespeare said, to assume a virtue, act as if you had it not. So part of being in action is walking in and not like silencing the normal like pattern interrupt. Say, shh, quiet, shh. Do it. Just be in it. If I was, and part of the, how can I make this fun? If I was to do this now, what would be my first action? How would I behave if I was to do this? And you not just fake it till you make it. That presumes that you're not, like, part of you isn't all in. When you act as if, all of you is in the, like, acting as if, you move your body, you use the tonality, you use the excitement and the gestures that are in alignment with how you want to be. I teach a flirting class, and it all happens every time these girls, or they're girls to me, girls come in and they'll say, like, we go out and, like, no one wants to talk to us. And through some questioning, I find out that they tend to find a booth, they'll get their drinks, and they'll talk to each other. And that is not in alignment with being open and available to conversation with other people. It's like, don't bother me, don't bother us. And in fact, they get so engrossed in the conversation, if someone does talk to them, they feel like it's an intrusion. And that's the energy, the vibe they put off. So, pretend there's a bed of hot coals here. I tell people to walk intentionally, to walk as if you're a fire walker. Hold your body up, and it's yes. And you can say cool moss, or I say yes, yes, yes. My instructor taught me to say cool moss, because it puts a different image in the mind. And if you walk with intentionality, that's the signal you say into your body. Another thing on there, in this 20 hacks, I say move 25% faster. If 25% is too fast, just go 10%. Just be more deliberate, 10% more deliberate in everything you do. When you get up, that's why I walked out of the room really quickly. I go for a walk and I give myself the command that every step I take, I'm more and more confident. Every step I take, I walk with confidence and assuredness. I'm somebody in the world. That when I walk in a room, there is a presence that's recognized. We're taught to hold our light under a bushel basket instead of holding it up for all the world to see. The poem Marianne Williamson, we hide from our light. And procrastination is in the story that we're telling that we're somewhat normal. You ain't normal. You're not special either. And sometimes we get upset because the world doesn't see our specialness. The only way you're special is what you bring to the table. Nobody, if you don't live your life the best you can, no one's going to notice. They notice if you are moving in the world and acting as if you have something to do. And how you do one aspect of your life is how you do every aspect. So sometimes when I get caught up in procrastination or I'm getting stuck on something, I'll clean the toilet.
That's right.
Or I'll wash dishes.
That's what I'm procrastinating about, though. The cleaning. Why? It's just gonna get dirty.
It's emotion.
Well, see, that is that conversation right there. That's a good example. Because that's what my son says too. Because it feels nice. On the other side of it, to have that, just that moment of cleaning. Now, I used to be like, why do it? Until I had someone coming over, and it's like, oh, mad dad. Like, that's something you realize just how filthy this place is. And it's a mad dad's putting everything away and shoving things in drawers and to give the appearance. And so I didn't like that stress, so I wanted to do a little bit every day just to keep up on it, to where I didn't have that big. To me, that was less stressful than cleaning it all one day. And actually, you have a day or two where you feel like you have to do something, go all out. And it's one is associate to the impact. I didn't really talk about that yet, but you want to get related. Different way to say this. If we avoid pain of doing the work, we want to get connected to the pain of not doing it. How is it impacting our life? How is it killing our potential? How is it ruining our relationships? How is it making our life more stressful? So you want to actually, the way you're viewing it is associate more pain to not doing it than doing it. And doing it's really easy. One of the best gifts my ex-wife gave me when we went our separate ways is she gave me a little thing out of Reader's Digest, how to clean your bathroom in 5 minutes. And it's all step by step, you know, you spray the stuff in the toilet, and you scrub it down, you let it sit, you clean the sinks, you clean this, clean that, clean the mirror, and you go back and you flush the toilet, you're done. And then you just take an extra, get the toothbrush out, get some gloves, and just clean everything down. I never knew boys were so dirty. But washing dishes is the same thing. Like, I look at it more as a meditation, and I'm very connected to the intentionality of washing each dish and being present in the moment. And to me, it's a gift to wash dishes. And that's why they're always left for me. But it's that my wife would disagree with that. But I enjoy washing dishes. So doing something physical like that you know you can get a handle on and get a quick win is a way to build momentum. And so the key terms are, you want to make sure that you're in alignment. You want to make sure that the story you're telling yourself works for you and not against you. That if you are procrastinating on something, get associated to the pain and the disappointment and the impact of not doing it. Because we've all been in a situation where we put off a project or something until the last minute where we know we have to turn it in, or we need to do it, or we're gonna pay. You know, we're gonna feel pain if we don't do it. So it's easy to put it off until tomorrow, put it off till later. And one of the things that I began telling myself, I never know what's gonna happen tomorrow. Everything, and so do it now while I have the opportunity. And I use the term, strike while the iron's hot. It's a blacksmithing term. Once you pull it up, you have to strike it while it's glowing red, so you can mold it, manipulate it, because if you wait till it's cold, it won't work. So when the enthusiasm is high, it's when you want to begin, take the first step. And one thing I didn't talk about yet is commitment. Most people experience commitment as a have to. The house cleaning occurs as a have to. God, I have to do this. Someone, like, if I don't do it, no one's going to do it. And it's just going to get dirty again, especially if you have kids. It's like, and so it's the commitment is, I want to live in a clean house. Because who do you live with 24/7, 365? Instead of saying, well, it's just me. Like, no one's going to really see it but me. Like, but I'm going to see it. Because you want to elevate your life to something you're proud of. Because when we live in that idea that we're not enough, that we're not good enough, it's because we've lowered our standards for ourselves. And if we raise our standards for ourselves and start holding ourselves to our own standards, not the impossible perfection standards, but to be perfectly imperfect and to be nurturing and supportive of our goals and dreams, then you begin to shift this whole aspect of procrastination. Because you've all had the experience of having something to do, something you wanted to do, and you've not experienced procrastination at all. You're so excited about doing it and so associated to the possibility of what was on the other side of it that you just did it. When you're standing here and the coals are in front of you, the coals just become, when you're focused on your outcome or your intention, the coals are just something to handle. This door right here is an obstacle. It prevents me from getting to the other side. But I've handled enough doors to where I know I can just turn that handle. It's just something just a little issue to take care of on the way. We blow things out of proportion. I got all this work to do. There's lots of different ways you can reframe it. How worse can it be? How bad can it be? There's people that are much worse off than you. You can always find someone worse off than you. If we compare to everyone is better than us, but we think they're better than us. We don't have their brains. We don't. Right? I'm the only person that I want to get up every morning with. I want this brain. I like this brain. It works for me. And I've learned over the years on how to make it work for me. And when you have a negative, icky feeling, all it's telling you is that something's a little off kilter in your thinking. You're not aligned. So all you do is bring things into alignment. It could be your emotions, it could be, maybe your heart's not in it. Why? You can ask, why isn't it? Because it's not what I really want to do. It's not valuable to me. It's not worth it. Then don't do it. Most people live in the shouldas and couldas, like you should do this. When that comes up, you say, according to who? What would happen if I didn't? If you've been putting something off, putting it off, like what if I just took it off my plate altogether and not worried about it? Sometimes you can let something go and say, I don't know why I was carrying it around for so long. I knew a guy that had a project car in his garage that he'd been working on for 25 years. He'd go to different swap meets and get parts for the car. It was constantly working on it. But he wasn't really working on it. He'd go out there and tool around a little bit and get distracted, and because there were aspects of the job that he just didn't want to do, or that he couldn't do. He didn't really want to pay somebody else to do. So once we got to it and said, what would happen if you just got rid of it? How would that feel? And at first he said, well, I can't do that because
All that I've invested.
all that I invested, all that time, and my dad was really into cars.
There's the key.
So he was trying to live up to his dad's expectations.
Probably dead.
His dad was dead. And I said, now imagine selling everything you have, everything you've accumulated, to a person that would really just love to work on it and put it together. Would that take a load off your shoulders? And you could actually see him shift in the chair. And he sold it the next week. And he said, when you get done, drive it over to my house, I want to see it. And so he also encouraged this guy, he says, like, finish it for me. And so sometimes there's projects you can let go of. There's projects that we have all over the house. There's strategies you can just write everything down. Just go through room by room, write everything down. Once it's on paper, then you can do it one bite at a time. Then it's out of your head, and you begin focusing on what you really want to do. Just looking at the time. It's 4:35. So, are there any questions at the moment?
Is it something about impact that you haven't gotten there yet?
Well, that's, I did kind of, but it's, when you look at one of the, you have to get related to or connected to the pain of what's there in not doing this task. And you want to shift the balance, the scales, to where it's more fun and more pleasurable to do the work than to suffer the pain of not doing it. The saddest words of tongue and pen are the words of what might have been. And it's like, we don't like to go there because it's an icky feeling. So we tend to gloss over that in order to move toward the good feelings. We take a spiritual bypass and just don't sit with. And this is where it takes some self-awareness. And just be present, like you're observing and not really experiencing the icky feeling, just observing, and you start asking questions about it. Why, what's causing the delay? Is this valuable to me? Do I really want to do it? Is it for me or for somebody else? See, when in the well-formed outcome, this car project was for somebody else, ultimately. It was to impress his dead father. And so he could not get past that because it wasn't what he really wanted to do. It wasn't what his passion really was. It wasn't his second nature. So when you get to the impact so you want to feel the pain, and so you want to build the pain up to where you cross what they call a threshold. You've all heard the term, the straw that broke the camel's back. So you want to build enough pain on there to where you can't go back. Like you can never not clean the bathroom now. Because when you look at it, really start looking at the filth. Really start looking at, like, look how much bacteria is growing here. Now, my ex-wife, God bless her, she used to get up in the middle of the night and think about the bacteria growing behind the fridge. She'd sit up, and go, what? Like, she had this dream about it. And I said, oh, okay, I fall back asleep. Next thing I know, she's up, fridge pulled out, she's cleaning behind, like, she could not live with that. That's a little extreme. But you start looking at all the filth, all the, like, do you want to be clean? Do you want to be healthy? And just think about all the negative ramifications of letting it go. And so if you can embellish, one way, making the work really hard and what's like terrible, you can go the other way in not doing it. Man, it's really hard. That's the impact. Like, really get related to the impact. So there's pain. And the straw that broke the camel's back is the camel would sit down on the ground and you throw a bale on it. And the camel would go, you throw another bale on it, the camel would go, every bale you throw on it would murmur. And once he put a bale on, the camel didn't say anything, take that bale off. That's too much. And so it's the idea that there's a point where just that much is too much. And you've all been to a point where you've tolerated something over and over again in your life, and it hit the point where I'm not tolerating that anymore. It could be with a person, it could be yourself, it could be. And so you had to get to the point, you want to engineer yourself to a point where you're mad as hell and you're not going to take it anymore. That gives you leverage. That initiates change. Something Lisa said is, so she calls them 2x4 course corrections. We tend to go through life and we don't change until we get hit up in the head with a 2x4. The stop sign always goes in the corner when someone dies. Not like, oh, that's a dangerous thing. We need to put a stop sign there. Well, no one's had an accident there yet. Why do that? It's like, you get to be preemptive. You can see when something's gonna happen. There's your future, you can tell your future. If I do the same thing that I've done day in, day out, you know the result you're gonna get. If you want to go to Little Rock, you know, you can say, this is where I am, that's where I wanna go. So you start treating yourself like you have the internal GPS. It's a plug in your destination, and it's constantly taking an assessment, where are you now to where you want to go. Now you might pull off, take a detour, stop at the gas station, and you hit the navigation, and what's the first thing it says? Rerouting. Calculating route. Or get to make the next legal U-turn, get out to make the left-hand turn, get out to the main road. It never says, if you miss your instruction 3, 4, 5 times, it never says, you idiot, like, listen to me. It just says, are you sure you want to go here? And you say yes. It says recalculating the route. And that's the way you want to be with yourself. If you see that you're off course, put yourself back on course. We tend to begin like driving off into the ditch, and we say, oh no, I'm driving into the ditch. I can't get away from the ditch. And we keep going instead of just course correcting, getting back on the road. Mm-hmm. We think it's fatal, or like we'll never recover. We just keep going in the ditch. So you just bring it back on course. And if tomorrow you procrastinate, you make a note of that. I procrastinated. Like, I put that off. I wonder what am I making so bad about this that won't get me started? Sometimes I'm not specific enough on what I want to achieve. I don't know where to begin. I don't know what the first step is. Thank you. And you can begin, and you get this guide and read through it, and a lot of things that I'm talking about today is going to make sense, even if it doesn't make so much sense now. Some things did stick. I saw it.
Oh, yeah.
So, and if you have any questions about this, you can email me for more information. My email's connected somewhere.
YesDaniel.com 20 hacks. That's the website.
Yeah, this is where you go,
The
and
website.
the 20 hacks, and it will take you to a page to put in your name and your email, and then it'll automatically, and then you'll be on my mailing list forever and ever. until you say, no, I don't want any more, and then you're free. But if all you want is the 20 hacks, you can get 20 hacks and then unsubscribe. Doesn't matter. But I have to know where to send it. And I used to print all this stuff up and put it, and then I find them wadded up on the floor and stuff. And I have this thing about sustainability that I really can't get around. And so I love the whole digital aspect. And plus I'm going to be putting out regular YouTube videos now, and I'm getting into the Facebook videos where I'll be talking more about peak performance issues and different mind hacks. I just had someone ask me how to program your sleep, so I'm going to do a little video on that. There is no thing outside your purview or your ability to change in your life. You can create every aspect, you can recreate every aspect. Just because you've gone down a particular road doesn't mean you have to stay on that road. Right? And if you think about the GPS example, at any point in time it never says, well, you idiot, you started in Dallas. How thoughtless was that? Like, you can't control that. I mean, just where are you now, where you want to go? Every moment you get up, you can become born anew. Like, when you look in the mirror, you can look at yourself as if you're looking at yourself for the first time. If you have particular behaviors that no longer serve you, that you want to drop, be like Shakespeare said, to assume a virtue, act as if you have it not. You just act your way into a whole new way of being. And you have the idea, how would I be, how would I act? Do we have 2 minutes?
Yes.
Used to have the opium dens in China, back in the 1600s, and they would take, the rich men would go there and they'd smoke opium until their money was exhausted. Then the owners of the opium den would kick them out in the street. And they were homeless, they'd lost their home by that time, their family, they were addicted, and penniless. They were bums. And the Shaolin monks would go in and collect these men. They're all men. Stupid.
Women weren't stupid enough to do that.
And would take them back to the monastery and would teach them to be health, be the cure, be health and wellness, vitality. Because if you're in the addiction, if you're being addicted, that's all you can be. Daniel Boone once said, I ain't never been lost, but I was once bewildered for about 3 days. See, in his mind, once you declare yourself lost, once you declare yourself an addict, once you declare yourself fat, once you declare yourself a procrastinator, you look in the mirror, that's the only way you can show up. But if you're always in the way of being your most elegant expression, you constantly can change. Instead of saying, I'm sick, I'm creating health and wellness, because you're in the process of healing. That's a different mindset, it's a different way of being. So be the cure, and be your magnificent self. Magnanimous self.
Yes. Yes.
So when you set your goal for the next 30 days, that you can begin with your breathing. And just take 3 deep breaths. Take it in, hold it for as long as you can, and let it out really slow. Takes less than a minute, but it changes how you feel. First thing in the morning, splash water on your face. Cold water. Not that cold in Texas. Not like I grew up in Michigan. It's 50 degrees coming out of the ground. Bracing. So just commit to yourself. Oh, just quick thing on commitment. Commitment shows up for most people as a have to, want to, or a have to, obligation, and a duty. That's not commitment. Commitment is a considered choice. If you decide to if you commit to your life, it's a considered choice because you get to your heart and your heart to your bones the long-term value of staying the course. Most of us, when we set a goal in motion, keep looking up here, we set a goal in motion, we get the motivation, the enthusiasm is high in the beginning because we see we're connected to the payoff, we're connected to the making the money, we're connected to the fame, the fortune, and then 3 days later it's like we can't find that vision anymore and you can't get yourself to get out of bed. But when you find that, you say, what am I committed to? I'm committed to having this dream. I'm committed to fulfilling on this. When I committed to my wife, it's like I recommit, excuse me, I get to recommit every day. Making one-time commitment does not carry me through because there's bumps in the road. So I get to recommit every time. And why I get the long-term value. And when you get the long-term value, you can bear anyhow. Nietzsche said, if you have a big enough why, you can bear anyhow. So if you get caught up in the procrastination side of it, you're just not focusing on the right thing. You're focusing on the goals, focus on the intention, focusing on walking the other side. And if, like, what you said about the bathroom is and you're not alone in that. And because people, they set the goal to work out. Like, I'm gonna get healthy, I'm gonna do this. And they go to the gym and they say, oh, I hate working out. I hate going to the gym. Then they quit 3 days later. Is it any wonder you go to the gym? Like, so you start to study people that are successes and model what they're doing. How do people, like things I say, like, I get to work out. It's a privilege. I get to move my body. I feel so much more phenomenal. I feel wonderful, energized after working out. So that's what you keep focusing on. And so all that other stuff in between is just incidental, just little issues to handle. So I could literally talk for another week. So I'm gonna call it a close. Get your 20 hacks. Stay in contact. There's more where this comes from. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, you can feel free to come up afterwards, but thank you very much.
Thank you.